afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this session. I know it's the last session for the day, probably the coming in between the cocktail time. Yeah,
Y'all can grab a beer and come back.
not really. I'll make sure that it is interesting enough for you to, ensure the timeline between your cocktail. See, from the topic, you would have got to know by now that it is very unique for especially for the maritime industry to have this kind of a tech enablement or the intervention in the shipping industry. So, technology has been intervening the shipping and maritime industry time to time, but not in totality, unlike many other sectors. There has been many players in various part of the value chain of the maritime. All have been trying their best to ensure that the output of that is meeting the customer's requirement, the ESG requirements, and the all KPIs. But very important is to understand what really they do in that isolated environment. Today with me on this topic of how technology is truly changing the game in the project industry, project cargo industry, I've got an esteemed panel which is each one of them have got a unique background and the company they lead. With me is Cynthia Worley, the Vice President Strategic Accounts for Sedna, and which deals with the smart email platforms for the maritime logistics and supply chain, a very unique business proposal. Then I have Keith Settle, who is the CEO for the Oxbow Mecca Transport Solution and a super ODC and ODC transportation solution provider. Darren Shelton, the co-founder and chief product officer for Fuel Trust. It's a unique digital platform for the bunker supply chain ecosystem. We'll hear more from him on this. And last but not the least, we have Matthew Costello, who is the CEO for the Voyager portal. Again, a unique solution, digitalization in shipping and vessel operations and management with multiple stakeholders. So it's important that we listen more from them, each one of them on what they do and what kind of technical solution they have, and then probably look at that how in entire value chain, where do they fit in, and I'll try to pose some of the questions which I have thought on your behalf to see if it actually normalizes the discussion. So to start with, I'll request Cynthia to go first, and maybe you can introduce your company details also, so good for the audience, sure, and share your views on how tech has been intervening, or you as a tech company, how you are changing the games in the maritime industry.
Sure, thank you, Dharmendra. I'm Cynthia Worley, happy to be here today, tell you a little bit about myself. First and foremost, I love to introduce myself as a cheerleader. I've been doing it since I was 5 years old, but about I guess it's been about 20 years now, I found shipping and trade, and particularly the digitalization aspect of shipping and trade, working in technology, trying to take our industry, which is quite conservative, to use a positive word, and pull them into the 21st century, get them excited by technology. I've been doing that with Sedna for about 3 years now, where I'm Vice President of Strategic Accounts. What is Sedna? We fix email. So you introduced it as an interesting concept, but I really want to reiterate that because most people say, what, email, fixing email? We fix email, marinate on that. Think about when you open your inbox and how it makes you feel in the morning. If you're sighing or shaking your head or pulling out your hair, we need to have a conversation. So we had a panel earlier today, I don't know if y'all saw it, but Bill from Fluor, he would say, why fix email? Email's dead, right? Email's gonna go the way of the fax machine. Well, it might do, and I think for our grandkids and their grandkids, they'll have it a lot easier than we do. But for us, and probably anybody 18 and over, we're still working on email. And it hasn't really had an upgrade since the 70s. So that's what Sedna do. We gave it a refresh, an extreme makeover. Anybody on TikTok, we give it a glow up, right? We make it actually work for you. So we're not here to sell Sedna, we're here to talk about technology and how we're working together. But if you're interested in a conversation later, we're at Q16, so come over for a beer.
Yeah, Thank you, Cynthia. Keith?
My name's Keith Settle. I've been with Oxbow Mega Transport Solutions since I founded it in 1993. So we'll be celebrating our 30th year next year. We move anything from a 300-ton historic church to nuclear reactor, to windmill parts, to you name it, in that time frame. If anybody's heard of the name of Oxbow, you may have seen us 4 or 5 years ago. There was an Amtrak accident where the lead engine was on the ground in the middle of I-5, and we scooped up the engine right before Christmas, 77 feet long, 300,000 pounds, and ended up on the front page of USA Today. So if you've seen that logo before, that's probably where you've seen it. What I'm going to speak mostly to today is how we get the technology to our drivers on their day-to-day loads. What we call the keep the lights on work, the simple stuff. Because what we found is the bigger, more difficult move, which is what we thrive in, is not where we have any issues. It's usually the simple day-to-day things that causes human complacency. And we've found some ways to expedite our route studies and our communications with our drivers that has greatly reduced or increased the safety of the loads that we've been delivering.
Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, we can have Darren.
Well, it's hard to follow a cheerleader and a guy who moves nuclear reactors, but I've been in the shipping industry for 26 years. Long before we had email, we had telex and typewriters and carbon copy. So I've seen all that go the way of the dodo bird. Maybe email will go that way. Maybe I'll still be around when it does. Fuel Trust is a software company that gives visibility to commodity life cycles. Specifically, we're focused on bunker fuels, being able to use a combination of AI and digital twins with blockchain to detect fraud. The big problem for anybody who's been in this business very long is nobody knows what's in their fuel until the fuel's in the tank, at which point it's either too late or expensive to solve it. We solve that problem. And in addition to being able to give quality assurance pre-purchase, we're also able to measure the molecules so that if you are moving a nuclear reactor on a boat, I can theoretically tell you what the carbon footprint of that boat is, and then you can do the math to figure out what the carbon footprint of the nuclear reactor on the boat is so that you can trade carbon credits around that.
Oh,
That's it. That's all I do.
interesting. And Matthew.
Yeah, so Matthew Costello, CEO of Voyager. We're a local Houston-based technology company, and we work with companies like Koch Industries and General Electric to manage the entire life cycle of their breakbulk shipping. So everything from planning and RFQs through to voyage execution, claims, demurrage. And I think what we do uniquely is our product allows our customers to collaborate digitally with all the stakeholders that are involved in those shipments. So our clients are collaborating with their agents, their brokers, their surveyors, their terminals, their carriers, all on a single system. And I think one of the things I'll talk about later is low code, but a lot of you have said to us in conversations over the last 3 days how important it is to have flexibility, right? Project and break bulk is different. Every shipment is different. Every client is different. Every business is different. So we created Voyager as a low-code system, and what that means is we can very quickly reconfigure the product without any coding to match the unique business processes. So if I was to leave you with one little snippet, it would be that within 4 years, everyone in this room will be building enterprise software. You will all have the ability to create your own apps, your own solutions to business problems using low-code and no-code solutions. So if I was to say what is one technology that I think is really going to change the industry for project cargo, given the need for flexibility, it would be low-code and no-code technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the tech service providers, I mean, there are 3 services which are available with one service provider and myself as probably project owner as an EPC. When I look at the tech services these days, there are far too many. For every segment, there is a special tech services is being made available. It really becomes difficult to choose which one suits the business requirement or business environment. And to top it all, we have the smart email service provider. I mean, that is something which is to complicate the whole ecosystem of the tech services itself. So how do you figure out in this, the multiple tech systems environment, sitting on the top one is a communication tool that is solution could be through a bot as well, but you say that you are a smart email box. So how do you play yourself among all tech players?
Sure. So if you think about email, why do we send emails? Because we're trying to share information, we're trying to share data at its core, and that is our transmission. Now, a lot of portals, a lot of blockchain initiatives have the goal of reducing emails, and that's a fantastic goal. But Matthew, you just mentioned that all across the supply chain, each person individually can communicate through the platform. But very often, we will have off-platform participants. Those who are laggards to technology, those who aren't quite ready to join the blockchain, and who want to hold on to the email that they're comfortable with. So what Sedna can do is it can allow us to extract the data from the email and use that in your system of records. So for instance, if you are more progressive, if you are using portals, if you do have a CTRM or an ERP system or a TMS that right now people are rekeying information into, we can automate those processes. So we say email because it's a comfortable term, but we're actually a data elevator and a data transmitter as well.
Really interesting. I mean, I like the line which you said earlier, the email is dead already, so most of our project cargo shipment tracking and the shipment communications happens on the WhatsApp group actually. I mean, there's extremely low information on the email being shared or exchanged.
Yes.
So that's really interesting. Matthew, I mean, on this note, what do you think from your experience point of view of this trying to give solution to the every stakeholders in that chain, value chain of the maritime? What do you think is the sort of current and the next wave of technology? Because we heard one here, which I can see is definitely a futuristic and I can see immediate future. How about you? What do you see that?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration systems as technology becomes more accessible. I think the last 2 years, there's been a lot of focus on agility in the supply chain, the ability to respond quickly, and a lot of that comes down to having systems that can seamlessly share data between each other. And I think the industry is doing a really good job of pushing tech vendors to become more deeply integrated. Companies like Sedna and ourselves have partnerships where we'll build integrations to connect, and I think that is becoming like a requirement. So I think the fact that vendors are going to be interconnected more often is a big wave that's really going to help. I think another trend that's not really a technology trend, but a macro trend, which is going to really help technology and Breakbulk, is actually emissions, which sounds unrelated, but think about emissions tracking. You have to agree on data standards. What's one of the biggest things missing in project cargo is common data standards to transform data between all the different participants. Now, emissions and the wave of emissions is going to do a lot for forcing people to have data standards, and you combine that with greater interconnectivity between systems, I actually think things are going to accelerate very quickly in project cargo because of these things. So.
And I'm sure even that will really help reduce somewhere the cost and schedule optimization for the project cargo. So as a project owners, I mean, we would be more always looking at the technology, which impacts cost and schedule both directly. So I think somewhere it will, with this availability of the data, information, right. Darren, in fact, I was just, while preparing for this session, I was just trying to note down some of the questions for you. And trust me, I mean, I couldn't figure out a single question which is common across. So I thought, I mean, when it comes to bunker fuel, I mean, when it comes to bunker or fuel, I mean, it's like sustainability comes in my mind first. How are you going to, is your system supporting in any way, the sustainability? Is it helping us improve the index?
Yeah, absolutely. Over half the cost of moving a project, any cargo by ship is going to be the fuel. The fuel is the big factor. And so there's a massive ROI that needs to be realized, not just from quality fuels, but as we have increased pressure towards sustainability, for having an insight into how clean green is that fuel going to be on that voyage, and having that knowledge in advance so it can inform the highly monetizable decisions. What we're able to do is look at a fuel and look at a ship and look at an engine and give predictability not only around how that fuel might perform, but what the carbon footprint might be, so that the carrier can then begin to think about fuel of the future type decisions, whether they're looking at any of the many alternatives that are commonly discussed, to have a side-by-side comparison so that they can make that determination. Because increasingly, your shippers are going to be wanting to think, how am I going to move this asset in a way that fits with my ESG goals? And they may be willing to pay a green premium in order to do it, but they're going to want some validation that you are in fact moving it that way. Add to that, when you begin to think about if there's any sustainable finance involved, that level of validation becomes all the more important.
Yeah, I mean, if you help the organizations meet their ESG goals, probably, it's a great support, because in
we
economic
just-
times, it will be much more demanded actually.
Correct.
Currently, it is requested.
Yeah, we
It will
just
become
did an
demanded.
analysis of a ship where we were able to validate that they've improved their carbon footprint by 39% over the last 3.5 years. Think about that. They're going to be able to take that number. They're going to be able to use it in their ESG reporting. They're going to be able to use that in marketing. They're going to be able to use that to support how they are working to reduce carbon footprints for their charters. So it's very important to have that kind of exterior validation.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that. When you say 39% reduction in carbon footprint,
Yes, sir.
does this get validated by any independent agencies, or how your tech output or the data which recommends
Right.
is getting validated?
Well, I think you got to first talk about the inputs, and I think Matthew kind of touched on this some around the data. We've got to have clean data inputs to work with first. So we take data that is from labs, in this case, fuel labs, which is very common in this industry, ISO 8217 lab reports. We use that along with metric data from the engines. We put that through a process of chemical digital twins that is powered by AI. Now, I think to your prevailing question, what we do can then be used with class or flag to meet regulatory requirements, with whom we are working to ensure that the math and the science is by accepted methodologies.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Keith, you are the man on ground. You move, you haulage nuclear reactor and many heavy cargo, super heavy cargo all the time. So the technology which you talked about, LiDAR, which how does really it help beyond your day-to-day operations? Does it kind of help in setting up some sort of a industry standards or something?
LiDAR's been an incredible technology for us. If you can imagine, let's just say it's a 24-foot wide load, 22 feet tall, and I'm going to take that 300 miles across country. Well, we have to prove that we can fit. Just because we say we can fit doesn't mean we can fit. We have to prove it to DOTs and everyone else. And when we started this 30 years ago, a route study consisted of a truck with a pole on it, 2 guys with orange jackets and a 100-foot tape and a spiral notebook. And imagine, if you will, this load, and you've got 2 telephone poles, because we always end up on the 2-lane roads. We don't get the 4-lane highways. We always get shipped off to the small roads, but you've got telephone poles lying on either side. And if anybody's done any driving around here in Houston, who's ever seen a straight telephone pole? So what good does it do to have a man pull a tape 24 feet across at the telephone pole, and you look up, and there might be 19 at the top? So this LiDAR technology that we've employed allows us to set the width of our load, set it on the vehicle, drive the route at speed limit speeds, and it records all the data straight up from there in a three-dimensional model. And what that's allowed us to do is, first of all, our route studies can be done hundreds of miles in a day instead of some of them were 20 to 50 miles a day. So our labor on that side has cut down dramatically, the time for turnaround. But the data that we get is immense, and it's much more detailed, and it's much easier to use that data to convince the DOTs and the regulatory agencies, because they actually have the ultimate say. When we're asking to move something that's over-dimensional, they have the ultimate say to say no. So we have to prove to them that we can do this, and it's much easier to show them a computer-generated technology with all the dimensions in 3D instead of the old, here's a picture, here's the turn radius. So for us, it's been a game changer from a safety standpoint, from a manpower standpoint, and I think in the next segment we'll talk about how we get that technology to our drivers as well. But it's totally changed the way we approach a route study now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this kind of data will probably, over a period of time, will become industry standards by itself.
Yes, I believe it should.
More and more getting used by other players as well on the same route. Probably it fixes the route much more in a defined way than what it is today.
Absolutely.
Right. I do have a couple of more questions listed down. I mean, but I thought I'll just ask, check if anyone from the audience would like to pose any question to any one of the panelists. It'll be interesting. I mean, I do have a couple of more, but still, there is one.
She's coming with a microphone.
Hi, my name is Ken Long. I won't repeat the question that I did this morning, but I would like to ask the question, Matthew, when you talk about, and what we find is the levels of information that are in play in logistics, and that the deeper you go, the more dense the information. And for example, you have a piece level, then you go up to a truck level, then you go to a ship level, but within that piece or package are items, individual purchase orders, items, and quantities. And most EPCs require that ultimately you provide them the visibility at that piece level, or they need that in particular for advanced work package planning. My question, to simplify that, is to what level is the industry now, and to what level do you think it will be going, especially with the technology that you talked about, the ability to write our own code? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll also just preface this. We're not a multimodal solution, so we don't do air and trucks. But I'll try my best to answer it. I think the best way to think of it is that systems these days are allowing anyone to become much more granular in the type of information and data that they collect. So if you look at a shipment right now, people might look at, the purchase order, the ETAs, the load, the discharge, the consignee. But, it's so easy now to create other data sets that roll into those larger, higher level data sets to create granularity around documents. But we're also seeing systems now creating metadata. So, for example, who uploaded that document? When did they upload? What department did they work in? What were the different types of interactions, the timeliness of those interactions? How long did it take them before they put the purchase order, then they actually uploaded the specification documents? This metadata is also allowing you to provide insights into how companies are actually executing the operations on a day-to-day level. And it's so much easier now to get that granular because you can now create systems through whether it's low code or just something else so quickly. So whether companies are that granular right now, I can't speak for all of them, but there is no reason why any company right now can't go down to the granularity that you just described extremely easily. And if they can't, then they need to talk to their software engineers because this is like not rocket science at all.
Yep. Any more question? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Well, first of all, I also have a fair share of my business dedicated to transport digitalization. But I wanted to hear from the speakers, what do they think about standardization? Like how far do you think should we or should we not go? Because there are on different conferences you have different ideas about how far you should go into standardizing cargo data or fleet data. What do you think? How far can we go? I mean, names of cargoes, for example, or vessel data. It's all. There are even the different projects dedicated to questionnaires. But that means that on every vessel, for each and every company, you have totally different, sometimes different information.
Got you.
How much can you go into this?
Well, who would like to pick that?
Well, I'll just start with some perspective. Over the past 20 years, I've been involved with projects to standardize trade confirmations, bills of lading, barge nominations, barge receipts, now bunker invoices and other things. My question back to you, and before back to you, Alex, but also to the panelists, is standardization required with the technology that we have today? Shouldn't it be smart enough to perhaps not require this level of standardization that we needed years ago when we couldn't be agile, when we didn't have machine learning and AI? So I'll start with that to open up. Alex, if you want to respond, or if my colleagues want to respond.
Yes, I think we do, because there is not a single list of vessels out there that has all the vessels in the world. You believe it or no, but there are different projects that say, okay, there are 85 different cargo ships in the world, but there are also digital projects, multi-million digital projects that say, no, there are 250,000 cargo ships in the world. Nobody knows. So of course there should be, standardization, according to me.
I would add that I don't disagree. I think we should standardize everywhere we can, and we should harmonize everywhere we can't standardize.
That's a great statement.
Because you're not wrong. I mean, some of it's potato. It doesn't. If we can standardize it, we should. If there is some glowing disparity that causes a lot of resistance to that standardization, then let's harmonize it so that we do have data neutrality, as it were, so that everybody can know that we're talking about the same thing, even if for whatever reason we feel like we still have to say it differently.
All right. You said it right. In fact, the harmonization is, if it cannot be standardized, harmonize it. So at least it is available for everyone to see it the same way rest of the world will see.
Right.
All right.
We have another.
Cynthia, sorry. Yeah, please go ahead. Where is that?
Yeah, so I wanted to add to the point of his questions is that I think there's already some level of standardization, because when you look at the EDI, which is, now it's considered old technology, but within the ocean industry, there's a certain level of communication between the forwarder and the shipper, right? So you have an EDI 200 and an EDI 300, right? So, and you can break that down to different levels, right? Like, let's say, the shipment deliver, right? Or the shipment is in transit, right? So you can set up setting codes, and that's already standardized within the air freight industry and as well as the ocean freight industry as well. So that eliminates the option of errors, right? So when you do A7 or A2 or A5, right? Once you key in that electronic data code, right, that transmit automatically to the system and both systems communicate. So, but there needs to be improvement, yes. And you can use API and whatever language that you want to use to make sure that those level of communications are standardized, and you can, so that it eliminates errors in the data that you're getting.
Yeah, right. So, okay. I'll come back to the audience again after some time. We've got a few more questions. Cynthia, I was just looking at your discussion earlier that you talked about a lot of artificial intelligence has been built in, and business intelligence comes out of the emails and flooded with the email box. With so many alerts coming in, pre-alert, post-alert, and then also, post-shipment, pre-shipment, and also there's a lot of communication happens.
course.
right? So among all these mails, how do you derive business intelligence out of it? I mean, does it really, I mean, the data is ultimately a data, I mean, the email data. It is for the recipient to make best out of it. What does it mean? How does your smart email box makes it as a business intelligence case?
So first and foremost, we hire staff, right, to solve complex problems because our industry is here to solve problems, whether the car goes on the road, you're getting somewhere from A to Z. But a lot of the times, those agents, those operators, are spending their time triaging their inbox, trying to find the problem to solve. So when we talk about being smart, it kind of comes back to what we've all said here, integrations, communication amongst systems. The difference with Sedna is number one, we have an integration agnostic approach. So we partner with systems of record, with Voyager portal, numerous amounts of partners in order to help drive the layer of intelligence that is coming from those systems. But equally, it doesn't just happen on incoming emails, but on emails that are going out as well. We can take the data and put it into the system of record that you need. So your operator is not transcribing information between one portal and another. Instead, they're focusing on solving the problem and letting the admin work happen in the background.
Interesting. Matthew, I mean, since on the Voyager portal we talked about end-to-end solution for the entire shipment life cycle. Probably on behalf of the project owners or the guys who are using this, who are the EPC players, we have seen the freight fluctuating in the last almost now 2.5, 3 years, going from $2,000 to $16,000, $18,000 per container. I mean, if I have to refer that, or MPP rate, which you can rate it, it has gone up and now it is climbing down. Everybody wants, especially the freight forwarding or the shipping line community suggests that this is the new normal, this is it, it will not further go down. But we have seen it going down. The way it has gone up when ship owners, when the cargo owners were saying that it is going too much up. So you have seen this kind of a cycle. Now, do you have a case where, based on your systems intelligence or some sort of a system architecture of yours, you're able to either predict or kind of reflect the potential decline or increase in the freight for any of the customers? I know it's a very tricky question. I mean, some of the audience may not like it if it is falling market.
I'll give you an example of how theoretically data could be used without giving like a specific client example. But let's talk about the freight market, right? EPC project cargoes, the freight market is often consistently tendered out to see what market rates are going to be doing in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 12 months' time. Like you're constantly testing the market to see what those forward rates are going to be, right? What would be a signal of the market tightening, right? Maybe the amount of carriers that actually respond to you, right? Like how many carriers just stopped replying to emails about market bids when the rates were going through the roof? Or did you see a change in the responsiveness, right? And vice versa, when the market starts going down again, do you start to see different carrier behaviors? How they bid on cargo, how flexible, how willing they are to go from one price down to another price and how quickly. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is that data that you can collect through different systems, if you use it correctly, can provide extremely meaningful signals and insights in what the market's doing. Now, is it necessarily going to get you a better freight rate? No, it may not, right? There's a lot of factors that go into a project or break bulk shipment, but everyone in this industry should be using this data on a day-to-day basis. Just try, pick up on these signals, use them, interpret them, apply your best knowledge to see what the market's going to be doing. Now, this is just one example, but I mean, especially in the last year or two where you've seen such big swings, we have looked at data sets on our system and we have seen changes in behavior on how people responded to RFQs throughout these different changes of markets. And in retrospect, when you look back at it, you're like, wow, yeah, actually, there were some signals there that the market was changing, right? So this is kind of slightly new in project cargo, but like finance, all these other industries, they do this all the time. They have like algorithmic traders doing this. So this is not new. This is just really applying these concepts to breakbulk, and it's becoming more and more possible to do that in this industry. So.
Yeah, in fact, I recall that it's in last 2 years, 2.5 years since the pandemic hit, probably the number of emails we would receive as an alert or a notice or some sort of kind of industry news, whenever the freights were going up, every 15 days we would receive some sort of this kind of communication to make us feel that yes, it's going up, either hurry up or get ready to pay higher freights. But I don't see the same frequency of the emails coming now since last 6 months or so. I mean, I think I was checking with someone here who was freight forwarder. I said, guys, I mean, you had flooded my emails to justify why the higher freights. But then the same is not happening when it is lowering down. So the frequency is now bi-monthly or maybe quarterly now. So this is where, some sort of intelligence system on the last so many transaction, what has been the freight trend, the plotting of the trend probably, and a marketplace kind of an ecosystem which you along with multiple customers could develop. Suppose your system is being used by multiple companies, you could probably come out with your own marketplace which can predict this kind of behavior. So we don't have to depend on the alerts from the freight forwarder or shippers, shipping companies. So marketplace could be another model. Right. Keith, I was just wondering, in fact, you talked about the LiDAR technology. This is one. But in your day-to-day operations, as a player, as a service provider on the ground, do you see that you still have, continue to have some pain areas where there are no technologies coming forward to help you? I mean, do you visualize anything?
I think there's always room for improvement. I mean, and one of the things we talked about in our panel before is whose responsibility is it for that improvement? And that goes to all of us as leaders. And it usually comes from identifying a problem, right? We need to solve a problem that we found. And for us, we've worked really hard on taking that LiDAR technology, because it doesn't do us any good to do a perfect route study if our driver does not have that right in front of him. So we've employed an app that we download all that LiDAR technology into that app. So it's the same as if you're going down the road with your Apple or Google map right now and it says exit coming, 1 mile, get in the right lane. Well, ours says low bridge coming, get ready for an up and over. Because what we have found is if we're going to have issues, it's not with the 24-foot high 300,000 pound load. It's with the 37th in the cell that we hauled to the same wind farm over and over and over with the same driver that's done it over and over, because human beings become complacent. And what we've always wanted was that little voice reminding them that, hey, this is that same bridge that you went around every single time. And now they have that. It's in a tablet right there. So it's a turn by turn. And the other thing that it's allowed us to do is, as conditions change, because you can have construction, you can have things change on a route monthly. Our drivers are able to enter data back and transfer that route to the next driver, so they know that there is construction here. The states do a great job of letting us know, but they're very conservative as far as saying what we can actually fit through where. Our drivers know exactly what they can do, but that allows that same route to be passed to the next driver who's 1 day behind the one before, has the exact same cargo, and he knows when he gets to road, or let's say exit 290, he needs to be in the far right-hand lane to be prepared, and he already has that. He's not guessing or listening to his lead driver. So it's allowed us to take that technology that we're gaining and have it in real time to the guys that are actually driving the trucks to keep the cargo safe.
Yeah, that'll improve the safety of the cargo as well as the driver as well. So
absolutely, and if there's one technology like you touched on, would be a database that's accessible for all providers. Right now it's something we do, and I'm sure there's other people that do it as well. But it used to be you could go buy a guide that showed you all the heights on everything. It was a road atlas, Well, the technology's obviously changed now, and every time it seems like you could take that information from our app and combine it to make a digital atlas per se for route studies.
Hope somebody from the tech world is listening to you. Will come with a solution
There's
soon.
definitely an opportunity there for someone to step up. Talk to me after the show.
Yeah. Sorry. Any questions from the audience at this time? Yeah, please. Somebody can help.
Yeah, so back to Keith, there's already a company that actually has a beta out for what you're talking about, so they're probably listening to you as well. But to the previous question that Matthew already answered, using data to drive decision making, I think there are a lot of indexes that are in there, that are out there that you can use from because if you're EPC or a shipper and you're not already using that, then I think you're still living in the 19th century as well. But what you can do is you can benchmark the various indexes, which has really good analytics, and also tie that into your historical shipment data. Because one of the things about the EPC that have in general the industry is that there's data out there, but they don't know how to use it. Right? The industry is very data rich because every decision that you make in your shipping process, right, that's the data that you can capture and make decisions. And so you can use your quotations and everything you're getting and benchmark that against existing indexes that are out there. And you should be able to be pretty much within, I would say, plus and minus maybe 80 to 90% accurate in your analytics for your pricing.
Yeah. Good. Any question more?
I have a point on what he's just said,
Okay.
because I think the word, if we had to choose a most frequently used word today in this session, it would be data, right? And it's all of our responsibility as technology suppliers to serve you data. But as you just said, the data is endless. There is so much data. It's up to you as consumers of that data to use it. So I would ask a question to our audience of what is your data plan? So many of my customers talk to me about data lakes, data distribution, data analytics. How are you making best use of your data?
Still takes a human to drive it, right?
Sure does.
I was going to just add, your questions are awesome, so thank you. And you're
Yes.
spot on every time.
Yeah.
And you raised a point that a lot of it comes down to, do people know what to do with it, right? So, which fundamentally is, what questions about our business do we want to answer, right? I want to answer the question, am I spending too much money on this trade lane, right? Am I overpaying for freight? Is my demurrage risk too big? And I think that for a lot of people in business, they'll often start with thinking about the data and just getting all this data together. And yes, you need to get your data together, and data lakes are good, but I think if you want to go down the journey, start with the problem and start with the questions you're trying to answer that you can't answer right now. Because if you work backwards from that, it'll start to give you signals on what type of data you need to collect, right? How you're going to collect it, the kind of structure that you need to collect. And I see a lot of digital projects in a lot of big organizations, which are like big data projects, but they don't have clearly defined questions that they're trying to answer, and they don't have clearly defined problems that they're trying to solve. So as a result, you get a lot of data, but then you have a workforce and a team that's kind of like, well, we don't really know what questions we're trying to answer, right? And then they figure out what questions they want to answer, and they realize they didn't have the right data in the first place. So start with the questions, and I think in general, like, there's still a lot of education that needs to happen, even in Breakbulk, about what questions can even be answered. Because the question of what is the freight market going to do in the next 6 months, that might seem like a really impossible question to ask or answer even. But if you go looking, right, if you start looking at the capacity of fleet, you start looking at like freight rates in different markets, like you can see the signals. So the answers are out there if you ask the right questions, and the data's there as well.
Yeah. Good. On this note,
Good timing.
I think
The buzzer ran out.
yeah, in fact. So I think we had a really good interactive session, and it was quite a learning session for us as well. Thank you very much, everyone,
Thank you.
Thank
for your
you.
participation here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.